All right, so let's do an objective analysis of this. This is not the typical video you're going to see. People on the left are going to look at this from the perspective very emotional, very focused on outrage against ICE and Donald Trump. And folks on the right are going to do the exact opposite. They're going to focus only on anything that exonerates the officer and makes it look like a justified shooting. And anything that goes against that, they're going to hide away from or dismiss. Unlike those two parties or those two tribes, I'm going to stay grounded in reality. What's actually happening and why? So why she stopped in that way where she's diagonal to the flow of traffic? I also noticed she seemed to be waving cars by. Why are they stopping and getting out of their vehicle? Why are they approaching her? What was happening immediately prior to this video? These are questions that I have. Many witnesses, and this has been just repeated without any sort of skepticism by left-wing and liberal media folks, have been talking about she's been given conflicting commands. One of the people who actually recorded one of these videos said the same thing. However, there is no evidence to demonstrate that. In the video, we see a single command repeated over and over again: "Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" Now, it is a common thing for police officers to give conflicting commands. I was literally just watching a video where they told a guy to roll over on his stomach or something, and while they were saying that, they were saying, "Keep your hands up." And it's like, if you're on the ground, how do you roll over with your hands up? Like, what? But I don't see that happening here. All right, so we're going to play this one more time, uninterrupted, and then we're going to give the detailed analysis step by step of what exactly is happening, unlike anything you're going to see anywhere. Now, if you're super emotional and you just want to focus on the outrage and you're upset with ICE, or you're the right wing and you've been told that this is all nonsense and liberal media, whatever, and you're not really interested in truth, it's not a video for you. This video is not a video to get a lot of views, right? If I want to get views, I will, ICE sucks and Trump did this and da-da-da and Shirley, whatever, and that's it, right? Hardly, if any, talk about anything on the other side, right? If I want to get money from the right wing, then it's like, oh, clearly his life was threatened and blah, 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 and ignore all the evidence to the contrary, right? Or I could play the both sides thing where it's kind of like, yeah, the cop was wrong, but she was wrong too. They were both wrong. They were equally wrong. It's all the same, right? That's not what I'm going to do here. I'm going to give you the raw truth. Raw truth is not profitable. It's not something that is going to draw a lot of traffic, but that's not my purpose here. My purpose here is to evaluate what exactly happened and show you how to look at things like this from an objective standpoint as opposed to a partisan one. So I'm going to let it play one more time. No interruptions.
No! No! Shame! Shame! Oh my God! What the f? What the f? You just what the f did you do?
Again, I did not hear any conflicting commands. I heard, get out of the car, get out of the car, get out of the effing car. That's what I heard. If you heard something else, let me know. I did not hear her getting conflicting commands. Now, let's break down step by step what exactly happened. I'll quickly give an introduction in terms of, where my biases might lie. And contrary to common belief, you can have biases and also still speak objectively. You don't have to be a slave to your biases, right? I think that there is massive problems with ICE. I think they're hiring essentially thugs. I think they're doing what the right wing pretended. This whole DEI thing was all made up. It was all top-down elites trying to manipulate the masses into this whole, they're hiring people that don't have skills. this is what literally ICE is doing right now. They literally lowered their standards, right? That's not just me, like as a partisan. This is what they're actually doing, right? So I am naturally inclined to be biased against ICE. Trump, I believe, is a criminal. I believe he's unhinged and has no moral compass whatsoever. I also have bias against left-wing media, right? I think they're very partisan. A lot of them are just Twitter repeaters. They get up in the morning, they see what's trending on Twitter, and then they jump on camera and repeat what they read on Twitter. No investigation, no sort of skepticism. If it's coming from left-wing trusted sources, they'll just repeat it and say, oh, they're bombing a bunch of fishermen. They're bombing fishermen, right? No curiosity to be actually honest. No attempt to actually take on a winning sort of mentality. They'll tell you about the democracy is under attack and all this kind of stuff. And the thing about it is, that being the case, then you would want to have a winner's attitude. A winner's attitude means that you do the very best that you can in everything that you can, right? How do people win? Whether it is races, whether it is, in terms of competitive races or sports, it's all about finely tuning everything to the maximum potential, right? So if you're in independent left-wing media and you truly believe that our democracy is under attack, which it is, right, then you would never be comfortable with sloppy journalism, right? You would never just see something on Twitter coming from a liberal left-wing source and then just repeat it on your channel. You would vet every source. You would vet everything that you're seeing. You hear something from a trusted source, you look at it skeptically and say, okay, how do you know that? What's your basis? What is your, right? And you do the groundwork before you post a video. Because, again, if you were really taking this seriously, what's happening in our country, then you don't want to give anything to the side that is destroying the country, right? You talk about fascism and we're losing our rights and all this kind of stuff. Well, every mistake that you make in left-wing media is an avenue for the right-wing media to pounce on and say, see, left-wing media, they're telling misinformation or whatever. They're the ones that give misinformation. They're the ones that are lying. They're not showing you the full story. They're not being honest with you, right? Every time you do that, you're giving points to the other side. That's how they pull people to their side, right? If you are a serious, independent left-wing person, you will take your job very seriously and not have a very lazy attitude of, I just want to jump on camera and try to get views on whatever latest is trending. That being said, here's what actually happened. Here's the breakdown. So here's the video slowed down. So I want you to notice that she is basically hand-waving that car to go by. And this appears to be one of the ICE vehicles or a law enforcement vehicle. You can see SUV with all the dark tints. And again, my first question is, what happened immediately before this? Why is her vehicle positioned the way it is? Some people say she's trying to turn around, but from what I can see here, this is a one-way, so she can't turn around. So that's not what she's doing. If she's trying to block traffic, she's doing a horrible job, obviously, because not only is she leaving a big space in the front of her vehicle, but she's literally waving them by. How do you block ICE? By giving them a big space and saying, hey, go on. I mean, she's not literally saying that, but I mean, she's waving them by, right? So you can't say she's blocking ICE from doing their jobs, right? But you can question, why is her vehicle positioned in this way? Take note, there's an officer on the right side of this video. I'm not sure who the person is behind him, if that's a civilian or that's a plainclothes officer. And this vehicle potentially is another law enforcement vehicle as well. Maybe that's this guy's vehicle, perhaps. She's waving again. You see her hand? So she waved that vehicle by. So now she's clearly waving this vehicle by, right? So if you want to have an idea that she's interfering, how do you interfere with having a big gap and telling these guys to go by? So now they're coming to a stop. Why are they coming to a stop? What are their intentions? Why don't they drive by like the other vehicle? What is the problem here? So they're now getting out, approaching the vehicle. This guy doesn't have his hands on his guns or anything. He's putting his hand off to the left. I'm not sure what that gesture means, because there's no place for her to go that way. So I don't know what that means, but I'm just observing everything here. So this guy's coming in hot, approaching the vehicle. Look at the brake lights in the back of her car. She's in park or in drive. Her wheels are turning to the left. So that could be from making that turn. If she was coming from where they were coming from and she, for some reason, turns. And I don't know, maybe she was trying to go around this vehicle. Because again, why is that vehicle there? And that could be the whole explanation. That could make this whole thing fit. Well, not the whole thing, but what we've seen so far. Like, in the very beginning, think about that for a second. See, this, you gotta look at everything, right? Look at all the details, full context. Don't just focus on what you want to focus on. Why is this vehicle, which I believe is a law enforcement vehicle, there from the get-go? Why does this vehicle, with, I believe, an ICE agent, why does he not care about this woman? If she's obstructing and she's doing something bad, why is there an ICE agent right here next to her, outside of his vehicle, and he doesn't care? He can clearly see her vehicle, right? So why isn't he getting her out of the way, if that's the problem? Right? And then the other vehicle that she waved by, why did that vehicle go by? So we have two other vehicles, the law enforcement guys. One next to her, doesn't care about her, is ignoring her. And then we have another one that drives by. Now, I will take a little bit of that back, because I lost track of where that officer went. So for all I know, he could be at her passenger side window. You guys rewind the video and comment and let me know if that's the case. But otherwise, I didn't see him really talking to her, engaging with her at all. I would also like to point out that in this moment, from what we can see, all the evidence here, her attention is focused to her left outside the driver's side window at this guy approaching her vehicle. Okay, now I see the reverse lights on. So if we back up, we see this guy's approaching her car. And if we pay attention to her brake lights, we see, boom, right there. So just before, I don't know, he's probably like 5 feet away when she shifts into a reverse. Right? Now, if you think that she's going to try to attack these officers, that would be a way to back up, you know, so that she can aim at this officer, in theory. But let's see what happens. As he approaches her vehicle to touch the vehicle, she starts slowly moving backwards. Now, a hostile actor that is looking to do harm to these officers, realizing that they're armed, is generally not going to be operating in such a subtle manner. They know that they need to react very quickly. They're not, most of the cases, not trying to die. So you'd want to stomp on the gas and get your vehicle back into position and then shift into drive, and then rapidly, she's moving very, very slowly backwards. And she only started moving just as he's about to touch the side of the car. Again, why are they approaching her? Why are they messing with her? Why do they want her to come out of the vehicle? So now she's officially going backwards while this idiot of an officer has his hands on the car. Now, this is one of my pet peeves with law enforcement, especially police officers, is this thing where they don't seem to understand. It's weird. You have situations where someone's pulling out a wallet and it looks like a gun, right? Or someone looks nervous and it's like, oh my goodness, I got to bring the dog. This guy looks nervous. Maybe he's a killer, right? So very, very subtle things. And it's like, oh my goodness, it's extreme levels of threat. But all of a sudden, someone's in a vehicle, thousands of pounds, and you're comfortable putting your arm on the side of the door while to a moving vehicle. You are a human being. You're not Superman, right? We've seen situations where they'll do this, and then the vehicle pulls off, and I saw an officer end up getting dragged by the vehicle. Like, what kind of moron, right? What kind of did not earn it person puts his hand inside of a vehicle? Now, if this person was a serial killer or some kind of gangster, something where, or an actual terrorist, right? Some kind of a high threat. I mean, even in that situation is still not advisable. But taking extreme and aggressive measures in an extreme and aggressive situation, things are different. But this is just some random lady in an SUV. It's a random lady in an SUV. There's no need to do anything unorthodox. You should be totally doing things sensible and being wise and cautious. Back away from the vehicle. Don't be hanging onto a vehicle that's moving. That is stupid. Now, here's the point that partisan left-wing media, not all of them, Breaking Points, I'm actually impressed, was the first ones that did a decent overview of this. But most of them, they won't even mention the fact that there's an officer directly in front of her vehicle. She's now out of reverse. She's now in drive. She has a thousands of pounds vehicle with the front of it aimed or pointed at an officer. But partisan left-wing media will only focus on this guy's on the side of the vehicle. There's no threat to him. He's on the side. Why does he? I'm pretty sure some of them even say that he's the one that's shooting her, right? I want you to look at whichever media you listen to, liberal or left-wing, and note whether they even mention the fact that there's an officer directly in front. Now, if you are a propagandist, a partisan propagandist, you're only going to want to focus on the narrative that is most profitable. If I'm talking to a left-wing audience, I want to talk about ICE sucks. These guys are savages. They just killed this poor woman. She's a mother, blah, blah, blah. She wasn't doing anything wrong, da, da, da. Right? That's all I want to focus on. That's stuff that is good to hear. Like a liberal audience, yes, tell the truth. That they would love that, right? So if that's what I am, a partisan left-wing propagandist, that's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to analyze this and look into all the details and get the full nuanced perspective, right? But I live in reality. I'm not here to cheerlead. So I right away point out the officer directly in front of the vehicle. His life is now in danger. I guess not technically now. The vehicle hasn't started moving. But even before that, standing in front of a vehicle that is running and that was just moving is a very dangerous position to be in. Now, the person who is most at fault right now is the officer. Officer, civilian, whatever it is, do not stand in front of a running vehicle. That is just plain stupid. I mean, even think about a scenario that you're working on your car with your dad and the engine is running, right? And your dad is sitting in the driver's seat. Like, you want to be cautious about standing in front of the vehicle. And that's your dad. Your dad's not trying to kill you, hopefully. But if the engine is running, you want to be very, very careful. Like, Dad, you have it in park, right? Especially depending on how old your dad is too, right? It's in park, right? And in general, probably try to stand on the side just in case. But here you have a potential hostile situation. You're trying to tell her to get out. She's not responding to you. You don't know who this woman is, right? But yet you're standing in front of the vehicle. So on one hand, you recognize the danger of the vehicle after you have used deadly force, right? But before you use the deadly force, all of a sudden you don't recognize that it's a deadly weapon, right? That can be a deadly weapon, right? Right now in this moment, there's no recognition of how dangerous it is to be standing there. There's no recognition of how dangerous it is to have your hand in the window, right? But after deadly force, weaponized and it's a deadly weapon. Come on, guys. If you know that this is can be used as a deadly weapon, and it can be, then don't fucking stand in front of it when you have this kind of situation going on. That's stupid. So the officer in the front, even though left-wing media most of them ignored the fact that this person is there, you are being negligent. You are putting your life in danger. You did that, not her, right? And also, she's probably focused on, that's the other reason why you don't do that. She's probably focused on the guy to her side, right? And she's panicking, she's stressed out. Very easy to not see the guy in front of you. A second ago, no one was there, right? So in your mind, and this is the same how car accidents happen, right? A second ago, like one car accident, people say, oh, the guy came out of nowhere. They didn't come out of nowhere. You just missed it, right? A second ago, you saw no one there. And then this guy's coming up to your car, and you're like, oh my goodness, what's he going to do, whatever. And you're panicking, and you're like, I got to get out of here. And then you start backing away or start trying to go this way, but you're distracted, you're stressed, and you don't see this guy standing there, right? And potentially you hit him, right? Which is why the officer shouldn't stand there. Okay, so now is when she officially starts moving forward towards the officer. The officer instantly is grabbing his firearm. Now, the partisan way to look at this is, why is he not jumping out of the way? You have much more maneuverability at these speeds as a human being than a car would. If she really wanted to knock him over, it would be extremely difficult if he doesn't want to be knocked over, right? In a split second, he can leap, hop to the left. At a minimum, maybe you catch his leg. Maybe you catch his leg. I mean, this is an SUV, it's a pilot. I don't think it can accelerate that quickly, right? But at worst, maybe you catch his leg. But you are not going to be able to do deadly harm to this guy if he doesn't want you to, and he's not a complete unqualified moron, right? A not unqualified moron can quickly and easily escape the danger even after you put yourself in that danger, right? Get the hell out of the way. However, the partisan approach is to focus only on that fact. The objective approach, the reality-based approach, is to also consider this officer's perspective. If you, like me, think this guy is unqualified, a moron, then you have to consider things from that framing. Either you think this guy's a professional, and if he's a professional, then a professional knows to get the hell out of the way. A professional wouldn't be standing in front of it in the first place, right? If you think the guy's a moron, then you can't just get to talking about, oh, he should have this, he should have that, and he just wanted to kill her, and he feels like he's above the law. He could do whatever he wants to do in terms of, like, I can just kill somebody and get away with it. Like, you can't go to those levels, right? Because as a moron ICE officer, you don't need none of that, right? As a moron ICE officer, I can easily see a conclusion that doesn't get to that extreme of, like, he just wanted to kill her, or he felt like he could kill and get away. Because what would a moron do in this situation, right? A moron, childish, like typical MAGA type person who is just like a teenager, right? First of all, a person like that has lack of control of emotions. So right now, your adrenaline is spiking and you're like, oh my goodness, oh, what does she think she's doing? Right? And then all of a sudden she starts moving towards you like, oh no, she's gonna try to kill me. And then you're like Mr. Badass superhero in your mind, right? And you're like, I gotta stop the threat. She's a threat. She's gonna run me over, right? That's exactly the way a moron who's unqualified would behave, right? So we don't need to jump to, malicious, like he just wanted to kill her, right? We can appreciate that he was wrong to kill her, and that in a court of law, hopefully, he would be convicted, wrongful death, some form of murder. While we can also recognize that this moron could have just panicked. Panicked, that's it. He sees the car moving towards him. He freaks out. He's a little bitch, right? So he pulls out his gun. That's the training, right? And think about the government that we have now with Pete Hegseth, and it's all about, they don't want to talk about rules of war. It's like just violence, violence, whatever it is, like most extreme, badass, right? That's the culture that he's a part of, right? And in that culture, it's like stop the threat, right? And it's not just one shot. You keep firing until this threat is neutralized. That is the mentality, right? So if you believe this guy's a moron, then you should be able to conceive that that's really what happened here, as opposed to the whole extremist, he just wanted to kill and he thought he could get away with it or whatever. Simply panicked, and then getting into that mode of, stop the threat. Like, that's how police training goes. There's more details to it than that, but that's part of how they're trained. It's like, I got to stop the threat, right? So you're not looking at the tire, the direction of the tire, and thinking about all this extra stuff and recognizing whatever else. You're just like, this car's moving towards me, and then it's like you have this like tunnel vision where all you see is a vehicle moving towards you, and you're looking at this woman, and she's trying to kill me, and then you just respond, just react, and it's bad, right? So I could see that. However, the fact that, so he's moving directly at this officer, right? I think if she continues on this path and the officer doesn't move, she will either barely miss the officer or slightly hit the officer, or worse, actually knock him over. I don't believe that's her intention, because the wheel is turned the other way, right? If you're trying to hit an officer that's to the left of you, it would make sense if you turn to the left. And remember, the wheel was turned to the left previously, right? She started with the wheels turned to the left. Now it's turned to the right. So in terms of intention, clearly she's trying to get away. So if you are a government official and you call this woman a terrorist, you are an absolute unhinged savage. Right? We don't need an investigation to see that she's clearly not trying to kill this officer. Right? We do need we do need an investigation to fully establish the culpability of this officer. We see enough this strong evidence that this is completely wrong, right? But we would need to see body camera. We would need to have more forensics evidence to get 100%. But I think from the video, we can 100% say that she was not trying to kill the officer. Because again, it is physically impossible to kill an officer with your vehicle, with your wheels turned to the opposite direction. Right? At a minimum, if she saw that he was close enough that she was going to tap him, at worst, she was looking to like knock him over or slightly injure him. But no reasonable person would expect, like if I really wanted to kill this officer, there's no reasonable person that would expect that turning your wheel in the opposite direction and possibly tapping them is not a certainty that you're going to hit the officer, right? They can jump out at any second, right? So it's not a guarantee, right? So you're making no effort, you're making minimal effort, I should say, to kill someone who probably doesn't want to be killed, right? So I think it's clear that the intention was not to kill the officer. The intention was to get out of the situation, right? Now, the first shot, without all the extra details, the officer could make some kind of argument that he felt his life was in danger. We could talk about he was wrong to be there in the first place, but okay, he was in a bad position. That's past tense. We do take consideration for that, but that's past tense. We're talking about the decision to make lethal force, to use deadly force. The first shot, we can see some kind of conversation to be had about he was honestly fearing for his life. However, I think that was the first shot, I believe. Now the vehicle is definitely getting away from him. And you can see he's leaning over towards the vehicle. So he's approaching the vehicle. The vehicle's not approaching him. He's approaching the vehicle. His life is not in danger. And again, context. This is not a serial killer, not some terrorist. It's just some random lady that was in her vehicle waving cars by. There's no need to be at an extreme level of like, we gotta stop the threat. Again, when the vehicle is aiming at you, that's one thing. But now that it's not aiming at you, I think it's time to back off. Step back, step away, assess the situation, and go from there. Notice how this officer here the whole time stays back in a safe distance. There's no chance this guy's going to get hit, right? It's only these two idiots, especially the one in the front, that are there putting their lives in danger, and now they're going to want to cry. I don't see any way to legally justify these shots. The shots from the side of the vehicle after the vehicle is pulled away, I don't see it. I don't see any legal justification for that. Completely wrong. And I unfortunately, America has become a very corrupt country, so I don't know whether this guy will get away with it. And we already have top level officials in our government saying that he's vindicated and he didn't do anything wrong, and calling the American citizen who was just assassinated in public streets a terrorist. Right? I wonder what would happen if the liberals and left-wing folks referred to Charlie Kirk as a terrorist. Right? If they extrapolated from his speech and the impact that it has on actual people that are taking actions based on his rhetoric, and they view him as a terrorist, and when he gets killed, rather than condemning it, they say, oh, well, one less terrorist or something like that. I wonder what the response would be from the American conservatives. Unlike Charlie Kirk, however, this is just some random woman, right? So if she's a terrorist, then maybe the left wing would be justified in calling Charlie Kirk a terrorist. But I know they wouldn't get away with that. That would be, you're going to get fired from a job or whatever. This is an American citizen shot in the face. That's another thing. People talk about, they want to focus on, again, that's the emotional angle. Focus on the fact that he shot her in the face. Again, putting yourself in that person's shoes. If you believe your life is threatened and you're standing in front of a vehicle, the only thing you can see is their face. That's the only, thing to shoot at. I mean, you could technically try to shoot blind through the dashboard and hope that the bullet doesn't get blocked by metal or whatever it is. I don't know what kind of gun he has. But I think the smart move, if you're trying to stop a person, using deadly force, would be a headshot. That's the only thing you can see. She's protected behind the vehicle. So it's not like she's standing out on the street and, they just intentionally, just to be brutal, shoot her in the face. It's like that's unfortunately the reality of the logistics of the situation. Now, once again, the officer was completely wrong. This guy, I don't know what his intentions are, but without me being a partisan person and letting my biases control my judgment, I can't say that he meant to do this, he meant to kill her, or he didn't care about her life, or whatever it is, because everything you see here can be explained away by him being a moron and him being a bitch that panicked, and this was the results, right? I can easily see that being a full-on explanation for what we see here. Not a justification in any way. This guy is wrong. He murdered that woman, and he should receive severe consequences for committing this murder, like anyone else in this country should. And I don't see any justification for this at a minimum. And that's next thing, forensics, right? Which shot killed her? Because there's like 3 shots. I don't know which ones hit her or whatever it is, but see, this is where the details matter, right? Because you could find out that the first shot killed her, and then I don't know how that would look. I mean, you could say at that moment he felt his life was threatened, and then, she was already dead. But the fact, if the other bullets didn't hit her, I don't think that's relevant, though, because he's still it still will be like an attempted murder, right? Because you're aiming a deadly weapon at a person who is no longer a threat, right? So even if they were a threat a second ago, because my understanding that's the way the laws work, right? So someone could come into my home and could actively threaten my life, and in that moment I could defend myself with a gun or whatever it is. But they turn their back and they start running out. I don't know. It depends on what state you're in terms of what if I shoot them in the back, you know, heading towards my front door, not out the house yet. Is that justified? Not justified? I think in some cases, maybe many cases, that's still a problem because they're running away. I think definitely once they leave the house, right, they're clearly retreating. I don't think I can justify killing them, right? Even if they were threatening my life a second ago, the second that they retreat, it's like, okay, right? So even if the first shot could be argued that it's justified, the second and third shots are like, come on. There's no justification for it, right? But again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if it's more serious if the second or third shot killed her versus the first one. I don't know how that works. Does it really matter? I don't know. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts on that. But again, these are the kind of nuance, and that's the way I look at things. I look at things from the standard of court of law, right? How would this look or play out in a court of law? What are the facts at hand? I'm not representing the woman. I'm not representing ICE, right? I am basically functioning somewhat as a judge, right? I'm looking at the evidence. I'm seeing things from the officer's perspective. I'm seeing things from the woman's perspective. And I'm assessing all these details and coming to a conclusion of officer was absolutely wrong. He committed murder. And then I would look to what kind of sentencing is appropriate. That's the way I approach this, right? Everyone else is going to approach it in terms of vindicating the officer or vindicating the woman. And there's some people that would focus primarily on vindicating one side or the other, but then throw in a little bit of, or some other stuff just to appear to be objective. So it's kind of like they focus on vindicating the officer, but then they might say something like, oh, well, but he shouldn't have stood in front of the thing, right? But 98% of the video is all the officer is totally legit. She's a terrorist, whatever it is. But you put in there somewhere that, he shouldn't have been in front of the vehicle. So it's kind of like you pretending to be objective. But as you can see, that's not the way I approach this, right? Every single instance to vindicate the officer, I took it. Every single incident to vindicate the woman, I took it. Every incident to attack the officer, I took it. Every incident to attack the woman, I took it. Because I want to look at the totality of evidence and where that takes me to, as opposed to trying to confirm my bias. My bias is against the officers. My bias is against ICE. But I'm not a slave to my bias. This is a choice that I make, and anyone else can choose to do so, but this is not something that many people choose to do. Anyway, this is the Debate Me channel. Debate Me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.